it is so lovely to be here. I'm really excited today. This is such a wonderful story of how people can connect online, and I'm so excited to share Mr. Aly Tamboura's story because I saw a 60-second clip on TikTok, and his story just stood out to me so much, and I was like, wow, this person has overcome so many obstacles to be the man that he is today. I had the pleasure of speaking with him earlier this week, and just I resonate with your story. And so often people will say to me, Christina, I could never do what you do, or I could just never do that. I could never overcome this. I'm from this kind of family. I have all of this negativity in my life. My husband doesn't believe in me. My wife doesn't believe in me. They're all these things, right? But Aly, your story just hit home for me and was so relevant. And I'm just so grateful that you're here today. So I'm not going to speak as much, but I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Aly Tamboura. And he's going to tell you a little bit about his life, because he has accomplished things that you could not believe after spending some time in prison. And, when I first started talking to you, let's just kind of start there at the beginning. I asked you, I said, why did you go to prison? What happened that you went to prison? Because talking to you in person, like, I mean, I know that years have passed, but you don't seem to me as someone that would go to prison.
Well, I never thought I'd go to prison either.
I bet.
I was in a emotionally charged situation and made a bad choice in that situation. Was charged with assault, with a firearm enhancement, and I was sentenced to 17 years in state prison. I did get a little bit of time back on an appeal, so I got that down to 14 years. And inevitably, I served 12 years.
Wow.
Got a little bit of time off for good behavior.
Well, and it's funny because one bad decision, one emotionally charged decision can change the course of your life. And when you explained to me, because it was an assault charge, and you didn't do anything violent, but like it was something that there's 10 years in California that is tacked on to a gun charge, right?
Even if it's not a real gun.
Right. It wasn't even a real gun. So let's talk about, like, right. It wasn't even a real gun. And so that again, just blows my mind. And then you got a 10-year charge on top of that. And I said to you, and like, you guys know, if you've been watching me, that I like to have the hard conversations, and there's a lot going on in the world right now. And I said to you, well, that seems like a ridiculous charge for something that, like, for 12 years you served with a fake gun and assault charge. And I said, do you think that somebody that was white would have had the same charge? And you said that you'd met other people in prison with the same charge that did not have the extra 10 years.
No, I've met people who never even went to prison. They went to the county jail where they had to take domestic violence classes. The judge that sentenced me in the courtroom I was in was just, the judge was well known for racial bias. And there's really no recourse. I mean, we tried everything. We complained to the bar, and we tried to get him recused from my case, because he had before he even heard my case, he told me I was going to prison. It was 17 times on the we did what we did. It's called an aggregated transcript, where it's, because every time I'd go in front of him, right, there'd be like a continuance, or they'd have to get this document, or I have to go get this. And so he didn't even hear the case, and he just kept telling me, you're going to prison, you're going to prison, you're going to prison. And that was part of my appeal. And the appellate court held that was a harmless error. Like, the judge, in other words, the judge shouldn't have said those things, but it still didn't have a big outcome on me going to prison.
And this is why I think it's so important that we start to have these conversations, because for so long people stayed silent. They stayed silent because it didn't affect them. And that is wrong, that people have stayed silent. And I'm so grateful that you're willing to have the open conversation, because what happened to you should never have happened. And it happens to many, many, many people in that system. And that's something that needs to change. It has to change.
You know, we live in America. We have I think like 300, around 350 million people. 70 million people have a criminal record.
What?
Yeah, so 1 in 2 people in America has a family member that has been incarcerated.
That's insane.
Yeah, 1 in 3 Black men will go to prison in their lifetime.
And then we wonder why they're scared to deal with the authorities, or we wonder why they're nervous to deal with the authorities, right? Like it's not unwarranted, is what I'm trying to say.
No, it's, yeah, it's that fight or flight spirit, If you know you're not going to be treated fairly, that's why a lot of people run.
Hey, I don't blame you. I would feel the same way if I knew that I was going to be accused of something or not be treated fairly, or that my life was at risk. Why would you run?
The gun violence that we see in America in Black communities between the police and Black men in particular, for me, that's it's a terrible thing. The nation's seeing it. But what's even worse is the power of the pen and what they write on paper. So, the same crooked cops, and they're not all that way, but the same crooked cops are able to write police reports that put people in prison and jail for decades. And once that police report is written, it becomes gospel. And I really think that is more dangerous than the shootings are abhorrent, but the stuff that they do in the back channels is, even worse. It has a bigger impact on communities of color.
And they don't even understand that the words that they're writing, the reports that they're writing, like those are changing people's lives. Like you lost 12 years of your life because of an emotional moment and a bad decision. 12 years.
And if you think about all the collateral consequences, right? Like my children, my community, when you start taking the wage earners out of communities, then they end up underserved and underprivileged, and there's this cascading effect that goes all through society, and taxpayers have to pay. California houses 121,000 men and women, and the prison budget is 13.1 billion.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's a business. The prison is a business.
Yeah, I think you could probably send everyone to get an Ivy League vacation or education and put them up in an apartment for the amount of money that they're spending on corrections here.
Wow, that is insanity to me. Well, let's talk a little bit more about what happened in that process when you were in prison, because what I find so humbling and so kind about you is that you don't have any resentment. Like you really, you're like, that was the time that I had to do, this was my life, and this is what I decided to do with it while I was there.
Right.
So what happened when you were in prison?
I can tell you, and it always wasn't that way.
I'm sure it's been a few years.
when I first was sentenced to prison, unfortunately, I was sent to a murder maximum security prison called Corcoran. Wow. In Corcoran, California, and I didn't think I was going to make it out of there alive. There's just there was just so much violence. I saw a man get shot by correctional officers from gun tower, countless stabbings, sexual assaults, riots. You name it. It was the hypervigilance that you have to learn to survive on that prison yard. It was.
You're always watching your back.
And I'm not exaggerating here. To tie your shoes when you're on the yard, you have to get someone that's aligned with you to stand with his back pressed against yours. And then you slide down and tie your shoe because you can't expose your back. Same thing goes for like the drinking fountains on the yard. That's how serious and that's how dangerous it is. And this is an indictment on the system too, because one of the things they do here is they sentence people to life without the possibility of parole. And every time you sentence someone to life without the possibility of parole, you put a lot of other people's lives in danger, because those men,
They don't care.
they don't have any hope. They have lost
Wow.
all hope.
I've never even thought of it that way. Like that is
And
a huge aha moment to me that I never thought about that concept, because you have nothing else to live for.
you have nothing to lose. And it puts correction staff at risk also. It's,
Wow.
it's not just incarcerated people.
Wow. No kidding. And so in that process, I know that you started working on an education.
Yeah, when I first went in, I started taking classes, distance learning. There were correspondence classes, and then I learned about a program called the Prison University Project, which is located at San Quentin. And every year when you're in prison, you go to an annual review, and you have a caseworker / counselor. And I had asked this counselor, I said, hey, I want to go, to this college program. And he was a pretty decent guy. He's like, I'm going to try to get you there. You got to wait a little while till your points drop, because what happens is every year, if you don't get any trouble, no fights, no stabbings, your points start dropping. If you get into trouble, the points stay up, or you get more points.
Right.
And so I managed to work my way down. The counselor kept his word, and I was transferred to San Quentin. And then I started taking classes there. And yeah, I mean, it was the atmosphere at that prison was like night and day. I could finally,
Tie your shoe without worrying.
You could tie your shoe without worrying. I could, I knew I was going to make it home after that. And then so,
Wow. And how many years was that from one to the other?
It was like 3 years before I got out of Corcoran.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
Something like that. And yeah, when I got to San Quentin, I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't even feel like prison anymore. They have a lot of programs there. And the difference is the men at San Quentin are sentenced to life with the possibility of parole, about 80% of them. And so they don't want to get in any trouble.
Right.
Right. Because they have to go to the parole board. I had a determinate sentence, so I didn't have to go to the parole board, but there's still violence. I mean, it's still a prison, but it's you can stay away from it. Where
right. You can stay out of
Corcoran, you just didn't know.
Right.
And yeah, so I started the college program, and also I worked as a clerk in the print shop. They used to print all the documents for the state. So even like DMV documents and things like that. And the warden then, there was a newspaper at San Quentin called the San Quentin News. And the warden wanted to reinvigorate the newspaper, and no one knew anything about running a newspaper. And so I called one of my old friends that worked at Adobe Systems, and asked her, like, what kind of software do you use to publish? And so got the prison to buy all this software and these computers. And because I was computer literate, a lot of the men that were in there were not, because they had been in prison before there was an internet, or before there was laptops and things like that. So I started helping them design the paper. I built out the logo, built out the design, and then we asked the Prison University Project to bring some journalists in and run a journalism class.
Wow, cool.
They brought a guy named Nigel Hatton, I think he's from Stanford. There's also Bill Drummond, who's a professor at UC Berkeley at the journalism school there. So we started writing a newspaper, and then the newspaper started getting traction. So and in the beginning, it was just disseminated in San Quentin. Now it goes to every prison in California.
Cool.
And some other prisons in other states. I'm not sure what the distribution is right now. I still am affiliated with them, but LA Times wrote articles about us. And then we started building a little bit of momentum. And I remember there was a senator down in Los Angeles that was writing some really terrible legislation. And so I invited him to San Quentin to talk about his terrible legislation. And I was surprised he showed up.
That's incredible.
It was Corin Price, I think it was his name. And he asked me why the legislation was terrible. And I said, this is why. And he says, well, how would you write it? And so I came up with some ideas, wrote it, and he took that, ran with it. And that little piece of writing I did became law in California. So then I got on this kind of, we can change things, right? We can do things, people will listen. And so as my time started winding down at San Quentin, another program started, which is called The Last Mile, which is, it teaches incarcerated people to write computer code, JavaScript, Python, and then all the peripheral HTML and CSS and those.
I don't know how to do any of that.
I didn't either. I didn't have, I was a math nerd when I was taking the university classes, and like took calculus 1, 2, and 3. And I just thought, oh, well, this is right up my alley. Then when I started writing code, it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to learn. It was really hard. It was not easy.
I'll leave it to you then.
So after there was 2 6-month tracks of the last, so it's about a year of sitting at a computer all day, every day. Well,
you're in prison. You're doing all of this at San Quentin, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, cool.
And then to keep the graduates their skill levels up, they started a development shop inside San Quentin called TLM Works, which is Last Mile Works, and it was a development shop. So we started building projects for paying customers, and they paid us really good compared to, like, my wage at the newspaper, I think, was 13 cents an hour.
Oh my gosh.
And at writing code, it went up to $16.71 an hour. Oh. And that's unheard of, like, in the carceral setting.
Right. And you made that happen. Like, that's what's so cool, is that, like, you kind of decided your own roles and you created space for what you wanted to do.
Yeah. And we had a lot of help, a lot of really good volunteers. And then, I remember, like, one of our first projects, we built a dashboard for Airbnb. I mean, these are like companies. We built a, they have a pretty good portfolio. If you look online, you can see the things that incarcerated people built. And then from there, it was time to go home. And it was a scary day.
To leave and come home?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things going on in that prison, and you just, I'd seen people, like, be walked out to go home, and they're like, oh, we miscalculated your time, you still have 3 months, you go back, or another law enforcement agency has a hold on them, so they go there and then they just get picked up and taken away. The U.S. Marshals are there all the time, so it's
nerve-wracking.
It's nerve-wracking. And then, my family sent me, they're called dress outs, but just basically a set of clothes for when you leave. And they dressed me up. And so the correctional officers, I'm in the holding cell, and, everyone else is, like, in jeans and stuff. And
you're in a suit.
I got. And
I love it.
And so the correctional officers are like, hey, what's the warden doing in the
cell,
in the holding cell? And then my daughter and my mother came and picked me up. We stopped at Starbucks, and I had my first real cup of coffee over a decade, and had so much caffeine I couldn't talk for about an hour.
It just hit you all at once.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to skip over this because I feel like this is a really cool part of your story that when you were in prison, you actually did a presentation for or in front of an audience, and Mark Zuckerberg was in that audience.
Well, it wasn't an audience. We were told that
Okay.
we were told that we had a special visitor
Okay.
coming to view the classroom, the coding classroom. And as part of the class, you build a capstone project. So everybody builds like a working web app or some kind of product. And so epidemiologist from Princeton reached out and said, "Hey, I have all this data on childhood diseases. Can you do something with it?" So I learned about this data visualization library called D3. Had my family send me like, actually the books are still there. Sent me like 30 books, and I just sat on my bunk and I read book after book after book after book. Once the data got into the prison, I built a data visualization app which shows the impact of childhood diseases, so like measles, mumps, chickenpox, over time since the beginning of data. So I think it was like 1928
Wow.
still present, and it was animated, so it was really, really, really a cool project. And so when I was told I had this special visitor, and people visit the prisons all the time, and a lot of us didn't like it because like it's almost like, oh, they're coming to view the animals in the zoo or something.
Right. You're in a goldfish in a bowl.
Right. And so so in walks Mark Zuckerberg, and I was just like, you're
Oh my
kidding.
God.
And what was really cool about Mark is he really, really wanted to know about the program, and he asked a lot of questions. And the instructor's like, "Ali, demo your data viz." So he put it up on the big projection screen, and I just showed him what I built, and he was like, "Yeah, you guys are building real software here." And before he left, I asked him, I said, "Would you hire, developers who are formerly incarcerated at Facebook?" And he didn't say yes, and he didn't say no, but he said apply. And I didn't.
You
I
did,
didn't.
but we did talk a little bit about coming out and trying to find a job and how difficult that was. So
Yeah,
when you came
that,
out, what happened? Like, how did this all progress?
when I first came home, um, I noticed there was a little bit of gaps in what I'd learned inside because there's no internet connectivity in there, and a lot of coding, it's called dependencies. So you need internet access to learn, not to learn. I mean, I learned enough to where I could get a job, but I really wanted to just really have it down solid and fill those gaps. So I did a coding boot camp in San Francisco, um, called Hack Reactor, which is awesome. I recommend it. Anyone wants to become a developer. And yeah, it was expensive. And then after Hack Reactor, I did some more classes on data structures and algorithms. And then I started applying for what they call full stack roles, which is where you can work on the front end. So everything like we see on the screen right now, and then the back end, like think if you like when you set enter and it sends your password, and I I was doing really well with these interviews. I get through, and people were just like, the team was like, "Yeah, we'll see you in a week," and then I wouldn't get a call. And one of the things I would never divulge that I'm formerly incarcerated. And at that point, I knew that the background check was coming up, and so I decided, to take control of the narrative. So I crafted a 250 word narrative. I did not use words like prison or ex-con. I said correctional facility. Made a mistake. And I also would do like a really deep dive into the company that I was applying for, and really learn about their products, learn about their history. And so when I get to the interview, I'd start it off and I just say, hey, look, I want to tell you right now up front that, you know, I made a mistake. I was in a correction facility. Then like, here's how I can add value to your company. And,
Incredible.
and then I started getting job offers, which was awesome. Yeah.
Incredible, just incredible. Honestly, to go through all of that and then to overcome and take control, because so many people think that they're stuck with their story.
Yeah.
And your mess is what is your message. Like this, the reason I wanted to interview you is because what you've been through is going to inspire so many other people to keep going. And you know, you educated yourself the entire way. You did the hard stuff. And then even more so, you took charge and you put yourself out there and you said the story that you needed to tell people as part of who you are and not something to be embarrassed of. This is part of who you are. And the reason why you are where you are is because of what you've been through.
You know, one of our greatest Black leaders in America says, "There's no shame in once being a criminal. There's shame in continuing to be a criminal." Right. And so, and with so many people who are system impacted in this country, you know, 70 million people, you know, either we're the most evil people on the planet, which I don't believe, or we're doing something wrong. We have 2.2 million people incarcerated. You know, we are 5% of the world's population, yet we have 25% of the world's prison population.
There's something wrong with that system.
And this is above countries that you know, you would like, the countries like Iran or countries where rights are really suppressed. Our prison population is higher than theirs.
It's unbelievable. And you know, I actually, I don't know if this is going to be controversial too, but I saw a tweet from Elon Musk a couple of weeks ago talking about, hey, if you know, marijuana is now legal in these states, should we not let people out of prison that are in prison for trafficking?
Marijuana, yeah.
Right? Like, if this is okay now, we're saying it's fine. Like, should we not just remedy this situation and let, right?
Absolutely. There's a lot of things
that's like just one piece
needs to happen with our criminal justice system. So when I finally ended up taking a job for a large software company here in the Bay Area, and I was onboarding at that company, and a recruiter reached out from a company called CZI, and I didn't know what CZI was. I soon found out it was the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and I really wasn't interested. You know, I just landed like this. It was a dream job for me. And I think we talked about this.
Yeah, more money than you ever thought that you would make, and it's
right,
a dream job. They're giving you everything, more than you could imagine.
Well, when I took the data structures and algorithm class, the last week of it was salary negotiation, and I just like, I don't need that. You know, for one, I'm, you know, middle-aged, African American, which is hard. You know, that's hard to break into tech as it is, and then I have this criminal conviction. So I was thinking, you know, the first job offer I get, and I'm taking it, right?
Yeah.
And at the time, I was on parole too, and you know, one of the conditions of parole is you work, you have to have a job.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got a first job offer, and in the data structures and algorithm class, they said you have to ask for 5 to 7 days before you accept the offer. And so when I got my first offer, it was more money than I thought I'd ever make. And I asked them for 5 to 7 days, which was really, really hard to do.
I bet.
And then I got another job offer. And then I was just switching the offers between the two companies, and they did this bidding war and got my wages up to like over $100,000 a year. And then the big company came in and just beat them by, you know, tens of thousands of dollars. And so, yeah, I was on the path to, you know, working as a full stack developer at the software company, and the recruiter at CZI reached out And there's one thing I didn't tell you when we talked earlier is I was late to that meeting, to the meeting with the recruiter from CZI. And I was late to that meeting because one of the men that worked with me at the San Quentin News, when we had started bringing more and more politicians into San Quentin, including district attorneys. So we had all district attorneys or prosecutors from California visit the prison. I think there's 54 of them. And we'd hold these forums and talk about accountability and so one of the district attorneys was a person that sentenced my friend to, well, his office sentenced my friend to 3 life sentences, 3 life terms for residential burglary.
That doesn't even compute to me. Like that doesn't even
It's
make
under the 3 strikes law.
Oh.
So this was his 3rd strike. He had been in trouble before for drugs. And residential burglary in California is considered a violent offense because of someone could be home.
Okay.
And he stole a firearm, so he got 25 to life for the firearm. He got 25 to life for his 3rd strike, and then he missed a court date, so he got 25 to life for failure to appear in court. And he had been in prison 17 years. And we convinced the DA to resentence him. And so I had gone to his court date and watched him get resentenced to time served. And then I jumped in my car and drove to Palo Alto to meet this recruiter. And it wasn't a big deal to me because, you know, I'd already lined up this other job.
Great job coming in.
Right. And so so we talked about why I was late. I said, hey, I'm sorry I'm late, but I think I just saved someone's life today. And he goes, wait, tell me. And so we started talking, and he goes, you know, we're starting a criminal justice reform division within the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. And I'm like, no, like, tell me more. And then we started talking, and I was telling him about, you know, some of the things I told you, like with the senator and you know, being really active in the community and trying to lower the footprint of corrections in our country. And he said, hey, are you interested in being a manager in our criminal justice reform department, even though we don't have one yet? And I said, yeah, you know, maybe let's check it out. So I went and I met the team and did a bunch of interviews, and they inevitably offered me more than the other company. And I just felt that this is something that has like purpose. It aligns with what I was already doing. Where, you know, CZI is a tech-based philanthropy. And so I took the job, and we have all hands meetings once a month with, you know, Priscilla Chan and Mark Zuckerberg. And I sat in the front row. And after they were done speaking, I got up and I approached Mark and I said, Mike, hey, you remember me? And he goes, no. And I go, you remember the coding program at San Quentin, the demo? And he looked at me, he's like, wow. He goes, like, I guess that coding program really paid off. And so, you know, there's been people who thought that I met Mark in San Quentin and he helped me get a job.
Right, and that wasn't the case.
That never happened. This is all on my own merit, and he was shocked that I worked for him.
That's incredible.
And it's been a just roller coaster ride of amazing things that have happened. The Chan Zuckerberg Initiative is an amazing place to work. They really take care of us. Priscilla Chan, the amount of passion that she puts into her work is unparalleled. She cries almost every meeting, right? She really wants the children of this world for it to be better for them. And the generations after that to be better. She's a pediatrician, and, you know, Mark's a tech guy. And so together, like, her heart and his tech acumen, right? So we're a tech-based philanthropy. We use technology along with grant making, to help make the world a better place. And yeah, I can't think of a better job to have where, I get to give away Mark Zuckerberg's money, or Mark Zuckerberg's money, and try to reform the criminal justice system, or transform it, and in a safe manner, and try to decarcerate America, try to get less people out of prisons and jails and more people into employment. Those are our North Stars in our criminal justice reform, is to actually, safely decarcerate, but also second chances, right? People need to be able to get back um, into employment so they can thrive, have access to healthcare, have access to education, and the mission of the philanthropy, it really aligns with my kind of outlook on life too.
Absolutely. And you actually get to stand for something that is incredibly important for you,
Yeah.
which
I
is
mean,
very powerful.
we get to change lives. I mean, so when I first came to CZI, they sent me to Tulsa, Oklahoma. I think Trump's going there pretty soon. That's a whole nother story, but
yeah, that's another live.
But I found out that Oklahoma has the highest incarceration rate of women than anywhere in the United States. And I remember coming back and I go, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? I called the last mile, the people that taught me how to write computer code. And I said, hey, would you guys expand into Oklahoma? And they said, yeah, we'd think about it. And I said, what about if I got CZI to write you a grant to expand into Oklahoma?
I could do that,
And yeah, and so I did that, and they expanded into Oklahoma in this women's correctional facility. I get these amazing letters from the women there. They at work, they call them Aly's girls, because they send me pictures and thank you. And when I get another funny story is like, I didn't tell the Department of Corrections in Oklahoma that I was formerly incarcerated. And so, I toured the prisons and stuff. And so the day I flew back out there when we launched the program, and I went with my friend MC Hammer. We're trying to get some press behind it. And the governor of Oklahoma showed up. His name is Kevin Skit, very, very nice guy. And I got up to tell the women, to really, really invest their time in this program. And I told them that I know this program works because I went through it. And then I remember, I think I have a picture of like the governor and everybody like looking at me like, you were incarcerated? And it's like, yeah.
I think I just appreciate that you're so open about talking about it, because you humanize the process. We hear humanize the badge so often right now, but you're humanizing being incarcerated. Like, this is something that happened to you. It was part of your life that, like, if you've never been in that system before, if you've never been arrested, if that's never happened to you, you would think bad people go to jail, right? Is that like, that's what we've been taught, but it doesn't necessarily happen that way. And there are a lot of really great people that could be out there working and making a difference and performing. And that's exactly what you've done. You've taken a really bad situation and a bad experience, and you've turned it into something where you can make a massive impact. And that's what you're doing. You're changing legislation. You're changing people's lives. You're saving their lives. Like, Aly, this is amazing. Like, incredible.
I'm not a unicorn. There's a group of us. There's a group of us here in the Bay Area, people that I knew that are in prison that are all in leadership roles. And a lot of the change that is going on with our criminal justice system, a lot of that change is driven by people who are formerly incarcerated, because we know the system and their family members. There's a national group called FICPFM. It's the formerly incarcerated peoples and families movement, and they're made up of about 70 organizations run by formerly incarcerated people. They are all within my portfolio at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and we fund them and also give them technical assistance. So we run national trainings, and they're running campaigns all over the United States in their geographies to lower the footprint of the carceral system, and like holding our leaders accountable, and and really, trying to make things equitable and fair in our criminal justice system. It's just not working. If it was working, think about it. 2.2 million people are in prison right now, prisons and jails. If it was working, the United States would be the safest place in the history of the world, right? It's not.
Right.
It's
You're
just
absolutely
not
right.
working.
You're like, that's
It's just
just
not
so
working,
easy to understand. Yeah.
right? We just, we incarcerate too much for too long, and sometimes for things that people shouldn't, like quality of life crimes. Um, it's almost a crime to be homeless in America. I mean, there's just so many things that they use the police for. Mental health, like we closed a lot of the mental health facilities during the Reagan era here. So now prisons and jails serve as mental health facilities.
And that's not the right place for them to be to get the right care. Like that's
No,
not.
it only exacerbates it. It only makes things worse. And I had the pleasure of going to Finland and Norway last year and touring their correctional systems, and it really changed my outlook. And they treat their people with dignity. You lose your freedom, but that's all you lose, right?
Mm,
You're not in prison to be punished further. And
right.
that's what happens in America, right? We damage people, right?
Yeah.
Many people come out worse than when they first went in, especially younger men. um, you know, Meet hardened people, and
And they have to survive.
right. And so, one of the benefits I had was being older, and I'm not easily shaped, or you couldn't get me to
Right.
join a gang or
Right.
anything like that. There's just no way.
Right.
But for young men, it's hard. And so when I went to Finland and Norway, like, no steel and concrete, right? Their prisons look like college dorms. I mean, there's still a big fence around the outside, but there's all this light, and they have artwork. And their mantra is, the day you step into the correctional facility is the day we start preparing you for a life without crime. And here it's like, we're just going to punish you more. And I think this system really, it it just keeps this cycle of poverty and crime going on, because when you come out, when people use like pejorative language, or like, you're an ex-convict, or you're a felon, and it's like a scarlet letter that people have to wear forever. And I always ask this question: what is the worst thing you've ever done? And even if you didn't get caught for it, but just the worst thing you've ever done. And imagine if
I'm not
someone,
answering that question.
yeah, exactly. And imagine if someone said, that's who you are for the rest of your life. That's who you are. You're the worst thing you've ever done. And that's what we do
Wow.
here. And
Wow.
and we're working really hard to change that narrative.
No kidding. I'm really proud of you. And I know that we're strangers. I know that we're in different countries. I know that the random internet connected me to you, and that you were gracious enough to take your time to speak with me earlier this week, and also right now to share your story and how you're making an impact. I really appreciate you. I appreciate what you're putting out there. I appreciate that you're fighting. Like it's so important to fight right now. And so I really appreciate that you're doing all of these things and using the initiative and the education that you have and the connections that you have to actually make a difference and save
Oh,
people's
yeah.
lives.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I love telling my story. One, because people really need to understand, like, the realities of the criminal justice system, and two, for the people that have been through it, and you just can't give up. You are worth something. You're way worth more than whatever you were incarcerated for. You can make it. You just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and don't take no for an answer, and own your story. Don't let other people tell your story. Tell your story yourself. There's nothing to be ashamed of.
Isn't that interesting? I love how you say that. Tell your story. Don't let anybody else tell it for you, because that's true to so many things, to so many people. It's just a perspective on how other people are projecting their judgments on you when they tell your story.
Right.
But you get to decide what your story is. And when you stand in your truth, and, intention means everything, right? Intention, if you have the intention to be good, if you have the intention to help, if you have the intention to make an impact, then that's what matters. It's not how other people are judging you or how they could feel towards you if they've never even gone through what you've been through.
Yeah.
Right. So
well put.
thank you so much. Is there anything else that you feel is really important to say? I've taken up enough of your time today, and I want to let you go, but I'm just so thankful that you were here today, and I just really appreciate you telling your story and being here.
No, just everyone stay safe.
Thank you.
The
Yeah,
virus
you
out
stay
there
safe
still.
too.
Uh,
Thank
all right.
you.
All right. Well, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.